Hey y'all, welcome back to another video. So today I want to go over some Bible facts that you may or may not have known. I don't know if this is going to be a series. That would be something that the Most High has to tell me, but I do want to go over some Bible facts that I just came into recently. I am a researcher. I like to know things. So I spend a lot of time on the Google. Yes, I know it's just Google, but I like to say the Google. So I spend a lot of time asking questions, researching. I also ask the Most High a lot of questions. A lot of my Bible notes are questions to the Most High, but that's another video. Number one, let's get into what is scripture specifically. In 2 Timothy 3 and 16, it says, all scripture is breathed out by Elohim and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for setting straight, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of Elohim might be fitted, equipped for every good work. So, what is scripture? When Shaul says that all of scripture is breathed out by Elohim, he's talking about the Old Testament. And before y'all even say anything, oh, the New Testament is fake, it's forged, it's not real, to each his own. We're not going to get into a debate about the New Testament. That's neither here nor there. During the time of the New Testament was not a thing. It was actively being lived. It was not written down. So all they had were the scrolls of the Old Testament. When it comes to what exactly is scripture, it is only the Old Testament. I'm not going to argue about that. I'm not going to try to be persuaded about that. No, scripture is only the Old Testament. And if I see any disrespectful comments, they will be deleted. Okay? Let's move on. Number two, let's talk about the letter J. This has highly been debated on the name Jesus. Now, I know many of you did not know this. I personally did not know this until I decided to go on the Google and figure out when was the letter J actually a letter. Come to find out, it was created in 1524 by an Italian grammarian named Gian Giorgio Trissini. And the letter J and the letter I were interchangeable. The letter J was just a decorative I with a little swash on the end of it to make it look fancy. That is it. So when it comes to the letter J, it was always the letter I. So how did we get the name Jesus? Number three, there are specific books in the Bible, to be more specific, the New Testament, that were written to people. There are letters that are written to people. So you can't even consider them to actually be books of the Bible, as they were letters. And they were addressed to certain people. And these books are Luke, Acts, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, 2nd and 3rd John. Why do we have them? That's like somebody taking the personal pages of your diary and exposing them to the entire world to read. Number four, and this is the one that I really wanted to get into because I had just come across this information like a few days ago. So I was just reading the book of Psalm, right? And I was reading, I don't even remember what chapters I was reading, but I realized that both of these chapters go together. And I had always heard that chapters and verses were not a thing when it came to the scriptures. So I'm just like, where did this come from? So what did I do? I went to the Google and asked, when were chapters and verses added? And you want to know something? Not too long ago, chapters were added around 1227 AD by Stephen Langton, who was the Archbishop of the Canterbury for the Latin Vulgate, Catholicism. Okay. He also created the Magna Carta. Verses were then added and finalized by 1551 AD. Old Testament, they were finalized in 1448 by Rabbi Nathan, and the New Testament verses were added by printer Robert Estienne, also known as Stephanus, in 1551. And the Geneva Bible was the first to use this combined system. And I thought to myself, that is why so much of the Bible is taken out of context. Because if you're not reading it in the way it was supposed to be written, then how are you going to get the full context? People talk about, oh, just read a chapter a day, just read the verse of the day. Well, what if that particular verse is a fragment of the verse before it and the one after it? You're taking it out of context. And there is a particular verse that people love to take out of context by Shaul, and this is the verse on the screen. And this is what the actual whole thing says. So, what are the pros and cons of chapters and verses in the Bible? Well, the pros are for organization. So, whenever you are trying to locate specific passages, you'll be able to find them quickly. Referencing, especially when you're talking in discussions, when you're having Bible study, when you want to tell someone where a specific verse is, you can say, oh, it's in this book, this chapter, and it is this verse. Memorization, studying and memorizing scripture. Now, here's the thing, if there were no verses and chapters in the Bible prior to between 5 and 700 years ago, then was memorization a thing? So, whenever somebody would memorize either a verse or a passage, how could they tell someone to go back and look at it? Well, here's the thing, the Bible was not a widely spread thing back then, they only had scrolls. Anytime someone wanted to hear the Bible, they would have to go to the synagogues or the temples or wherever they went and worshiped. The cons of this, and I see this all the time when I'm doing my own personal Bible study, is that there are arbitrary divisions, meaning that there are randomly divided chapters and verses, and we see this all the time. And this is why the Bible is always misinterpreted. Context disruption. Let me give you a little example. I was reading First Samuel chapter 17, and I got to the end of the chapter. Then I read the first verse of chapter 18. I was like, now, wait a minute. Why did they decide to divide this there? Because the end of chapter 17 is when somebody was speaking. At the beginning of chapter 18, that person was still speaking. Why was this divided here? That doesn't make sense. Even when I'm reading the book of Psalms, there are so many Psalms that go together. Now, I will say this, the book of Psalms was the only book of the Bible that did have chapters, specifically because they were not written all by David like most people believe. These were a collection. So they were divided by chapters because they were written at different times. However, some of these chapters, I do not understand why they were divided. For example, chapters 17 and 18. Another example, chapters 14 and 15. Don't understand why. Fragmentation, and this goes along with what I was saying about context disruption and arbitrary divisions. When I was saying about that one particular verse that everyone likes to misquote, that one verse that people like to always misinterpret and misquote, when Paul says to be free from the body is to be with Yahuwah, or however that verse goes. If you read the whole thing, and people use this specific verse to talk about how people go to heaven, spoiler alert, nobody goes to heaven and nobody has ever been to heaven. But anyway, they use that verse because it's taken out of context. It's what pastors and preachers and teachers do. That's how people take all things out of context. They take a verse, they read that verse, they meditate on that verse. You cannot do that. You cannot take one verse and make it mean something or apply to your life when you have taken it out of context. Because if you read it within context, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a different understanding. And the last one, interpretation bias. That goes along with the other three that I mentioned, that people are going to misinterpret it. So, my question for this last Bible fact, who authorized this?